Joining me now is evolutionary behavioural scientist and author of the bestseller, The Parasitic Mind, How Infectious Ideas Are Killing Common Sense, and his latest book, The Saad Truth About Happiness, Dr Gad Saad. So good to speak with you again. Let's talk happiness and wokeness. I was fascinated to see this piece in the New York Post today revealing one truth about happiness. It seems that you're less likely to experience it if you're woke. A Finnish study has found a high prevalence of anxiety and depression among people who hold woke beliefs. They also found that those who identified as left-wing were more likely to report lower mental well-being than those who were right-wing or apolitical. Is that what you found in your research as well, Dr. Saad?
Right. Well, great to be with you again, Rita. Yeah. So in my latest book, the happiness book, I actually talk about various correlates to happiness. One of which is a ubiquitous finding that's been found in the literature, namely that your political orientation is correlated with happiness. Specifically, conservatives on average are happier than liberals or progressive, or as the Finnish study says, woke people. Now, I offer an explanation for that in the book, and I basically argue that, when conservatives wake up in the morning, by the very definition of the word conservative, they think that there is a set of values that are worth conserving in the current society. So they wake up with a sense of existential happiness. It doesn't mean that the society is perfect, but they're in a good place existentially. On the other hand, the wokester wakes up with existential doom, right? We live in a transphobic society. We live on stolen land. We live in a misogynistic society. We're committing genocide on Indigenous people. And therefore, if only we can re-engineer society, around the corner, we'll be able to find unicornia. So the Finnish study doesn't surprise me at all.
Now, your previous book, The Parasitic Mind, was a sensation, and when it came out, I still said referred to constantly online. It explores how parasitic ideas are spreading like a virus across the West, killing reason and killing freedom. But one of the things that confuses people on the left to this day is, what do we mean when we say woke? So if I could get from you a definition of that word, and if you could also explain to my audience why you say this ideology is poison.
Well, it's parasitic because once you hold on to those beliefs, it is contrary to your best interest. So let me give you an example of what constitutes a parasitic mechanism. So for example, the wood cricket is a cricket that abhors water. But when it is parasitized by a particular worm, neuroparasite called a hairworm, the hairworm needs to get the wood cricket to jump into water in order for it to complete its reproductive cycle. So once that wood cricket is parasitized by this neuroparasite, it merely jumps to commit suicide because it serves the interest of the parasite. And so in my book, The Parasitic Mind, what I argue is that human beings can also be parasitized not only by actual physical worms, they could be parasitized by ideological worms. So postmodernism, cultural relativism, radical feminism, transgender activism, the rejection of biology in explaining human behavior, which I call biophobia. All of these parasitic ideas, when put together, create the wokesters that you see walking around on university campuses.
Well, one of the ranks is Don Lemon, television host Don Lemon. He had his exclusive contract to host the Don Lemon Show on X cancelled by Elon Musk just hours after his premiere episode, which featured Elon Musk. You very kindly gave Don Lemon some sage advice. Can you share that with my audience? And do you think he will take it? Is it too far gone? Is the parasitic mind taken hold with Don Lemon?
Yes, I fear that my advice is impenetrable to his fully parasitized mind. Basically, what I told him is, look, you have the opportunity here to speak to arguably the person that most people would be most desirous to speak to, a truly historic figure who's done unbelievable things. And there are so many things that you could explore with him. You're given this opportunity, and yet you can't extricate yourself from the gotcha strategies, from the accusatory tones and so on. What a wasted opportunity. And as I think we might talk about, just a few days later, it so happened, yesterday actually, Elon and I had a conversation on an X Spaces. So far, it's been watched, I think, tuned in by nearly 750,000 people. No accusations, no virulence, just two guys down to earth that hopefully have interesting things to say, having a fun chat. And it was even fun in that we were debugging some of the features of the latest option on the X Spaces in vivo, like online. So that shows you, the humility with which we approached each other. And Don Lemon completely missed the opportunity to really have a wonderful conversation with a brilliant guy.
And it was back on CNN within minutes, moaning about it, moaning about his ex-contract. I mean, he's still allowed to be on the platform. His account hasn't been banned. Tell me about that chat with Elon Musk. You were hosting it. He was one of the participants, and I saw a bit of it. But what did you learn? What came out of that was most valuable for you?
I think, there's specific content that was valuable in that I was asking Elon, do you think that entrepreneurship proclivity is due to nature or nurture? So I asked him technical, interesting, pointed questions. But I think what I got most out of it is a personal element, which is, here's a guy who is, I suppose, the richest person who's ever lived. And if you see how down to earth he is, how humble he is, he was joking around with me, he was pranking me. That's, I think, what was most remarkable about this guy, right? I mean, if you ever would think about someone who should have a chip on his shoulder, it would be Elon. And yet he was anything but that. And so I found that so refreshing, so invigorating. And I think that's probably the thing that, made me feel the best about that chat.
Now, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson from the US Supreme Court seems to not understand the Constitution she is meant to protect. She expressed concerns that the First Amendment was hamstringing the federal government too severely. What do you make of today's shock revelations about the Supreme Court Justice appointed by Joe Biden?
So I'll begin, before I answer that, I'll go on an oblique tangent for a second. Until about 15 minutes ago, the 117 billion people who've been estimated to have existed on Earth absolutely knew the definition of male or female. But yet when she was being confirmed, if you remember, she said that, she's not a biologist, yes, so she couldn't, right? So if we have a Supreme Court justice who's incapable of telling us what a woman is, then I'm not surprised that she's having some difficulties understanding the intricacies of the First Amendment mechanisms. But to answer your question more directly, this is actually something that I speak about in The Parasitic Mind, the difference between deontological and consequentialist ethics. Deontological ethics are absolute statements of truth. So freedom of speech should be a deontological principle. You never say, I believe in freedom of speech, but on the other hand, if your spouse asks you, do I look fat in those jeans? Then you could put on your consequentialist hat, because then you might say, I'm going to lie to spare my spouse's feelings. But when it comes to foundational principles that are enshrined in the First Amendment, it has to be a deontological principle. And apparently our U.S. Supreme Court Justice is unaware of that distinction. So it was grotesque, but it didn't surprise me.
It is disturbing. It is disturbing to have someone in her position make a comment like that. And it wasn't just one comment. I've listened to the whole questioning she had around that First Amendment, and wow, astonishing. Now, I want to ask you about musician Neil Young. He has announced he's going to come back to Spotify after he quit the site because of Joe Rogan and supposed disinformation. He got all sorts of excuses for the backflip here, but in the end, it seems when it comes to these celebrity opinions, they love to grandstand, but they also love money, and they love that Spotify money perhaps more than their principles.
You're right. And I mean, one of the things that I love, to go back to Elon, and I think one of the reasons my voice resonates is because I think that we really are driven by a set of principles and we don't deviate from them. But when you look at all of these imbeciles in Hollywood and all these actors and singers, they go with how the wind blows, right? And so when everybody was saying, if Donald Trump were to win in 2016, I'm moving to Canada. I live in Canada. I'm still waiting for Cher to move to Canada. She hasn't apparently moved to Canada yet. And so they, from this side of their mouth, they grandstand, and from this side of their mouth, they violate all of their quote principles. They're grotesque. They're idiots. They don't have a moral compass.
Before you go, I have to get your opinion on how things are going in Canada. Your great and fearless leader, Justin Trudeau. What's the political environment like in Canada? And is Trudeau in peril? Will he survive the next election?
Well, certainly the polls are showing that he is in peril. And so if the elections were to happen tomorrow, I think that he'd be, it would be, oh, dare I say a bloodbath? Am I allowed to say a bloodbath, or am I calling for a genocide if I use the word? Maybe I shouldn't say that.
Yeah, well,
it would be a massacre. Can I say that? Or that's also incitement to violence. But anyways, look,
don't
Canada,
say a landslide either, because that's frightening. It won't be a landslide either. Yes.
Right. No, I think he would definitely lose. And I received a text a few days ago from Elon, a private one, where he said, "Hey, I wonder, how is it that you could survive in Canada with such rampant woke mind viruses?" And so to your question, it's very difficult for me not only to be in Canada, but to be within the university ecosystem in Quebec, because my own university, there are many things that I love about it. It's very, very woke. And so it is definitely difficult to walk on my shoes on a daily basis, but I do it hopefully with a smile.
Well, we rely on you, Dr. Saad, and Jordan Peterson to fight the good fight in Canada. I know there is others, but you two are leading the way. Thank you so much for your time this evening. Really do appreciate it.